Well, howdy, y'all, and welcome to another high-powered episode of the High Voltage Live Show. I'm your co-host, Willie Snyder, joined by my excellent co-host over there in Longhorn State, James Stallcup, and I'm over here in the Mile High City, Denver, Colorado. We have a great episode coming for you guys tonight, and I just want to thank everyone who participated in the Myth of the Week. Everyone's been participating a lot in the NEC for Dummies. I'm just blown away how fast that group's growing, and I'm blown away. I have groups with 60, 70,000 members, and Dummies is blowing them away with the participation. So it's really awesome that we have so many people interested in the code, interested in busting myths and trying to get this out here. I actually fooled the fire alarm guy, the programmer. He's a NISAT 3, and I says, yeah, our myth of the week this week is about putting a 15 amp receptacle on a 20 amp circuit. He's all, well, I guarantee you can't do that. I said, well, gotcha. So it was a lot of fun. And I says, all right, well, you might want to watch the show and you probably learn something. But really appreciate you putting this together, James. I like the new intro song. That's pretty cool. And it's nice to switch it up and get it kind of mixed up. You know, we got a lot of people in the house tonight. We got David Englehart. Appreciate you joining us, sir. Yeah, I didn't hear about that.
That's actually my little brother Billy.
Okay.
His wife Deborah, and we just found out today that they're going to Mayo after first year to get the second opinion, but apparently she's going to be able to go through some chemo, radiation, and they're going to be able to shrink it and then go in and take it out. And they think they might be able to get it in remission. So, well, you know, everybody's saying prayer for her. We'll see what happens.
Nice. Well, yeah, David, that's a really good point. David always brings the code reference with him. He's got 210.21B3, which is correct. Basically, all receptacles are rated for 15 or 20 amp. So all receptacles are rated at 20 amps. They just have a different plastic face where you plug them in. So I get people on that a lot. I actually made a meme about this, like with Mike Holt. I actually sent the meme to Mike Holt and told him about it. And everyone's like, hey, I'm just letting you know your meme's wrong. So it's pretty funny to just joke around about this, and I get a lot of people on it. You know, like I say, congratulations on your Stars. They're still doing really good. Went to the Avs game on Monday with my nephew, and it's really awesome to go to a game. And Evan Rodriguez did just a nasty move and just totally burned the goalie right out of his shoes, out of his skates. So it's pretty awesome to go to an actual game and watch the Avs win. We've won 2 in a row now, so pretty awesome to, you know, I get into hockey. I'm on some of these hockey shows, and it's pretty fun to do.
No worries.
So, yeah, right. But what did you think of the meme of the week? I ran across it on one of the pages in one of the groups, and I thought, yeah, want to do the meme of the week?
All right, I'll cue it up.
Yeah, I always think it's funny, like when I'll have like a new tool, like wrapper or something. My wife's like, what's that from? Where'd that come from? You know, like, what? Oh, it's just a wrapper. It's, you know, how much did that cost? You know,
so I remember that, and I bought a new putter from my golf bag. She goes, didn't you already have one? I said, yeah, I did, and it's right in there. I'll use it every now and then. I like this new one better.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that could be a tool for, you know, your golf game or whatever. But it's pretty funny. I actually made it the cover photo for the Electricians Only tour review. So it was pretty funny. So
yeah, I like that.
like messing around. So pretty awesome. And I guess we'll go ahead and roll the myth of the week. Got a surprise for
let's
you.
roll it.
It's time for Myth of the Week.
All right. Well, David got the correct answer this week. The myth of the week is you are allowed to put 15 amp receptacles on a 20 amp circuit per 21021B3. And there was a lot of awesome comments on there. And so this is actually from one of the control cabinets from one of the jobs I was on. This is actually probably not governed by the NEC, just based on the fact this is like a listed piece of equipment. But it was a good example of, showing how, like, I think the reason I took this was somebody said they didn't make a 15 amp GFCI or something like that. I don't remember what they said, but this was pretty awesome to, kind of show that. And, obviously there's pretty much a code that in this factory per our specs, we're required to run 20 amp circuits to everything. We're not allowed to have, like, if we have a 15 amp circuit, it's got to be a 15 amp circuit for a reason. Like, that piece of equipment has to call for a 15 amp circuit. Otherwise it has to be 20 amp. But hey, awesome, Mike. Merry Christmas, sir. Awesome to see you in the chat. Awesome, thanks for joining us.
He'll be on at the first of the year.
Yep. Yeah, I always learn stuff when I get guys like that on, and it cracks me up because I could just see these guys all suited up in a utility station. That's what 70E says.
It was very enlightening listening to him explain it on the utility side.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it just so happened that I had a perfect example of where that service point kind of starts and ends and where the safety kind of changes. And I wouldn't have thought about that because sometimes when we're in that situation on that service point, those bus bars are connected. So, the one side of the bus bar is on our side on the MDP, and then the other side of that is on the I think it's IEEE 1580 something standard. I can't remember. I think it was 1589 or something. But I try to listen, but it's like my retention of all that is limited when we're going through some of this stuff really fast. But it's really awesome to have all these people join from like the NEC for Dummies, the Electrical Wall of Shame, Electrical Violations page or group. I always say page, it's group, and stuff like that. We have so many people jumping in, participate, and get the comments in there. Some people were like, hey, this is basically true and false because you didn't say if it's a single or a duplex, So that was a pretty good comment to kind of keep in mind, because if this is a 15 amp simplex single receptacle, then it is a code violation. It has to be 2 or more per the code language. So if it's a duplex, it's 2 or more.
Well, what I did here, I decided to show 210.21B2 and B3. We'll talk about this. And you'll see if you're talking about cord and plug connected, like you just said, this is where you have a branch circuit supplying 2 or more receptacle outlets. And it talks about the receptacle shall not supply a total cord and plug connected load in excess of the maximum that's specified in table 210.21B2. And this sets up your receptacle rating and what the maximum load that's permitted on each one of them. So if you get into your cord and plug connected. These are the loads. And like David Englehart was saying, when you go to B3, this is where you get into your receptacle ratings. And you'll notice right here in the next table, this tells you here what can be connected to that circuit. And if you see 20 amp there, then come across and pick up your receptacle ratings. It says you can put a 15 or 20 amp over it, but for a 15, it can't be over 15. So
Right.
there's your answer right there. But
Yep.
that gives two different tables for people to go to look at to get the amperage rating for the receptacles, and then what type of receptacles can be installed on the ampere rating for the circuit.
Yeah, and I like that one for a 40 amp. You could put a 50 amp receptacle on a 40 amp rated circuit. So that's another one that kind of gets people a little confused sometimes too.
Yeah, you can make that as one of your one time
Yeah.
too. But people
I might catch. I got to catch everyone off guard though. I got a few people on this one, and it was pretty funny. For the majority, I would say we probably had probably 95% of everyone was correct. That it is true that you can put a 15 amp rated receptacle on a 20 amp circuit. So sometimes you get these myths, and everyone's like, "Why is this a myth?" And it's like, well, because you do have some of those people that think, I just, what, code's the minimum. I just put 20 amp on everything. Well, you're probably wasting money if you do that. So, that's kind of why we bring these, and that's kind of why we come up with these myths. And for me, it's a lot of fun because, especially when I get people, I've gotten some really top people before. Like I've gotten some code making panel members before where I went and just changed the language of the code just a little bit, and like a true or false or something. And then they're like, "Oh, true." And then they're like, "Hey, did you read it? Oh, dang it." And
Yeah.
so it's pretty funny. And they're like, "Oh, gotcha." And it's pretty funny. We got, just
Cool.
let people catch people off guard, not reading it all the way or whatever. And it's just fun to do for me.
All right.
So
Well,
I guess we're ready to roll into the topic. Sounds like you're
a lot
fired up.
I think a lot of people will be interested in hearing the topic of the week, which I'm going to circle back on, and we're going to look at 210.8F. Okay. So let me go ahead and get us queued up, and then we'll start covering this stuff.
Welcome in.
All right. Topic.
We have a hello. How you doing from High Voltage Live? Go ahead. Sorry, didn't mean
welcome everybody. This would be a good one to show up for tonight. Basically, what we're going to accidentally left a 2 in there, but this is the change that took place for 210.F, where we dealt with outdoor outlets. Now, when we put this in our publication, it hadn't been voted on by the Standards Council, and it took a while to get it, and we couldn't wait on the publication any longer. So there will be 2 exceptions in there now, which we're going to look at in a little bit. But what we tried to clarify here is we stated that we felt that even if GFCI protection was going to be required, that there were going to be compatibility issues with the Class A device. And therefore, we did not agree that you were going to have GFCI protection in this cycle period. We stuck with that, and that's what we believed. Now, what has taken place, that is what's going to happen. Okay. And they're going to refer you to September 1st, 2026. But I can already tell you, based on the new UL standard that will be coming out for HVAC equipment with UL, it's going to be at 10 milliamps. So you're still going to have a compatibility issue. And with reading what the HVAC manufacturers, at first they were sort of in agreement with the GFCI protection, but after they started doing some testing on their equipment and stuff, this is never going to happen. So I'm
Right.
just telling you, it's not going to happen. So the next,
Well,
the next,
I thought it was interesting when I asked a member of Code Making Panel 2 if they like did an investigation for compatibility on EBSE, and they said, "Oh no, that's governed by Code Making Panel 12." And so I was
Mhm.
like, "Oh, okay." And then when you go over to Code Making Panel 12, they says GFCI protection not required when hardwired because integral GFCI protection is already required. And that
Mhm.
aligns with a bunch of other stuff that's in Code Making Panel 2, where it says if the equipment or the whatever the utilization equipment comes with integral GFCI protection, then it's not required. So I think that
Right.
kind of helps align some stuff there.
It does. As a matter of fact, in our substantiation, we specifically pointed out that there was no substantiation provided by code-making panel 2 to address the location of an outlet. Therefore, we felt that GFCI protection was not required for the AC unit, electrical vehicle, service equipment, etc. Now, one of the things I do want to point out, and we did this a while back, but if you go look at the substantiation in the first revision and second revision to 210.8D, Code Making Panel 2 was very specific about cord and plug connected and hardwired, and they didn't care if it was vintage or not, that you needed to have GFCI protection. But when you
Right.
got to the substantiation for 210.8F, just magically they didn't make any reference to any of that. And I thought
Well,
that was
and
a telling sign,
yeah,
in my opinion.
yeah, David Englehart brings up a great point because EBSE does require a grounded conductor. So I just installed one and they did require a grounded conductor to EBSE. But I asked the customer, would you like this to be on GFCI protection? It's in a garage, da 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 da. It does, the equipment does have integral GFCI protection. He says, I'm fine with it. If he
Yep.
has to sell that house or something, he might have to bring it up to code and put it on a GFCI because it's a cord and plug connected installation. But he was fine with the integral GFCI protection. So you would per 210.8, you would have to have GFCI protection for the receptacle, and then when you cord and plug connect it, then the equipment itself has GFCI protection. And he says he didn't need two; he only needed one.
Sure. All right. Now, this just came out, and this is from the Standards Council. And just so everybody knows what the decision is, it's final per D number 22-12. And this was agenda item SC 22-8-16 D, E, and F. And the date of the decision was August 12th, 2022. And this covers TIA numbers 1653, 1654, 1656, and 1657. And this
That
is
sounds
related to
familiar.
every from the 2020 and 23 edition. So this you need to pay attention to because this is going to get into the appellant that raised concerns based on what Code Making Panel 2 did. So everything I'm showing you that's about to come up is final decision of the Standards Council. So it really doesn't matter what Code Making Panel 2 says, what their opinion is. This is the final. Okay.
Right.
So if they're out there telling you something different, I'm telling you right now, don't listen to it. Okay.
Yep.
This is the infinitive decision right here. Okay. So let me tell you what happened here. Now, they got the summary of the action. I'm not too worried about that. I'm going to get into the decision and explaining what took place. It says, at this meeting of August 10th through the 12th, 2022, the Standards Council considered appeals from three appellants. All right. William Koffel, representing the leading builders of America, Mary Coben, the Air Conditioned Heating and Refrigerating Institute, and Bill Bixby, the Air Conditioning Contractors of America Association. These appellants request that the Standard Council overturn the ballot results and recommendations of Code Making Panel 2 and the National Electrical Code Correlating Committee, if upheld, the results of this council action would be to issue TIA number 1653 and 54 and not issue the TIA number 1656 and 1657 on the 2020 and 2023 editions of NFPA. Specifically, the appeals request that the Standards Council issue TIA number 1653 and 54, which revise section 210.8F and exception number 2, which will be new. So basically what's happening here is the number 1653 and 54, which you're about to hear, was done by the task group that was put forth and submitted to co-making panel 2, and they were accepted on emergency nature, but for technical substantiation they wasn't. Now, before we get into that, they did hundreds of different AC units in Houston, and they did all different type of units, and they had substantiation where this was a problem. But there are certain members apparently that put together TIA number 1656 and 57 and said it had technical substantiation, but yet 1653 and 54 that was done by the task group that was recommended to be put together by the Standards Council for 2020, they disregarded these TIAs and said theirs had technical substantiation. Therefore, they put this in. And matter of fact, Thomas Dimitrovich did a thing when they were doing this at the correlating committee, where they accept the code at the meeting, and said Brian Jackson got up there and did a mic drop. Well, apparently it's not a mic drop. Okay. And I've been waiting for this to drop before I made any comment, because I was specifically said that this ain't gonna fly. There's too many people. I'm in the industry. I talk to these people. I know what's going on. All right. Now the next one.
Yeah, and one of the ones that was thrown out in there, it was funny. I think they were saying that it was like barely English or something like that. I was like, wow. I was like, that's pretty freaking arrogant there.
Well, we've had a lot of these guys come on there and tell us we have an ego, we're arrogant, we've lost all credibility, the Stalkit name's been tarnished and all this, just because I didn't agree with what they said. Well, this is redemption, I guess you could say, in a way.
Right.
Now, I've posted this, and now all of a sudden it's quiet. Nobody wants to comment. But let's do this. Now watch this. It says, as background. Now listen to everything I'm going to say, anybody that's watching this podcast. It says, the text of 210.8F and the subject of ground fault circuit interrupter protection for outdoor HVAC equipment has been at the heart of multiple process TIAs. Now listen, as well as extensive task group work since issuance of the 2020 edition of NFPA 70. So they're telling you here, they done extensive task group work, but yet it lacked, by co-making panel 2, certain members said it lacked technical merit. Now this is where it gets good. It says during that period, council reviewed 5 TAs seeking to amend 210.8F within the 2020 edition of NEC, only to which TIA 1593 passed ballot. When TIA 1593 came before council for issuance as its August 2021 meeting, it was a subject of appeal by multiple parties. So what this is telling you, this has been going on for a while, this argument.
Right.
It says, while the council did issue TIA 1593 and part of its decision on that appeal, the council directed the formation of a task group of affected stakeholders to evaluate and reach, now listen to this, an informed, technically substantiated resolution to the issues raised in the appeal. The council also encouraged the task group to submit a TIA if appropriate, which they did. Then it says, in accordance with that direction, A task group was formed, included members from the HVAC industry, home builders industry. Listen to this: the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, the GFCI manufacturers, as well as some members of Code-Making Panel 2 and the NEC Correlating Committee. This task group developed TIA's numbers 16, 53, and 54, which were supported by a simple majority of the task group members and submitted with task group approval by appellant William Kofel for processing. Then it says a minority of the task group members, however, favored different language and submitted TIA numbers 16, 56, and 57 for processing simultaneously, providing optional language for the responsible code-making panel's consideration. Now, think about that for a minute. I've been on a lot of task groups, and usually there's nothing really submitted another TIA. What they'll do is look at it and make changes. I've never been in one where another TIA was submitted. So what that tells me, there was a different alternative here. Somebody that was pushing something else. That's the way I read this. But let's go further and see what the Standards Council saw here. Then it says, the 4 TIA subject to this appeal were balloted by Code-Making Panel 2 and the Correlating Committee in accordance with the regulations governing the development of NFPA standards regulations to determine whether the necessary 3/4 majority support was achieved on technical merit. Now listen, technical merit, emergency nature, and correlation for recommendation of issuance. Then it says 2 of the TIAs, which is the ones that were submitted by the task group, 16, 53, and 54. Well, let me rephrase that. 16, 53, and 56 were processed for the 2020 edition, while the 2 remaining, 16, 54, and 57, were proceeded concurrently on the 2023. Okay? So 16, 53, and 54 each failed to achieve the necessary support. Now listen to this, of Code-Making Panel 2 on technical merit. But yet, that's what it was put in place to do. So all of a sudden, you've got certain members on Code-Making Panel 2 that are failing the task group's work that was done to show all the different types of AC units. And based on those AC units and everything, and all the work they did, it didn't pass on technical merit. This is hard. For me, this is hard to believe what I'm reading right now. But it says, but achieved the necessary support on emergency nature. Listen to this. Then it says, while achieving support of the Correlating Committee on Correlation, TIA numbers 15, 16, 56, and 57 achieved the necessary support of Code-Making Panel 2 on both technical merit and emergency nature, as well as achieving support of the Correlating Committee on Correlation. Now let's talk about that for a minute. What technical merit did they have? The technical merit they had was, there were 4 deaths that took place. 3 didn't have anything to do with the residential. It was because people wasn't working on it properly. The one that had to deal with residential was because of the AC unit, which wasn't wired properly. So therefore, if it had been wired properly, we wouldn't have had a death there. And you had that as far as I can tell, that is their technical substantiation. But these hundreds of AC units that they went out and tested all different types and showed where they were having problems, certain members on Code-Making Panel 2 that voted against TIA numbers 53 and 54 somehow didn't achieve the technical merit. That, I'm going to tell you what, this smells foul to me at this point.
Well, you know what's so funny about that is, so Nihad wrote the public input that was passed by Code-Making Panel 2 to put 210.8F in the code. And remember when we were asking Nihad, like, oh, hey, did that equipment have a ground? And he's like, I don't know anything about that. And So yeah, you might want to know if it had an equipment ground,
That's right.
before you get this public input passed, because even The Rock was saying that 250, 118 could have helped in that regard.
Sure. And I'll take it even a step further. I heard that podcast, and he basically said anything that's outside has to have GFCI protection. Really? You're going to do that in some hazards? Boy, I heard some of this. I just couldn't believe what he was saying. But let's go a little bit further what they said.
All right. Yeah.
They said also the text of TIA numbers 53 and 54, subject to this appeal, did not gain a sufficient three-quarter co-making channel support within the standards development process for inclusion in the 2020 and 23 editions of NFPA 70, respectively. On appeal, the council accords great respect and deference to the NFPA standards development process. But here's where it gets interesting. In conducting its review, the council will overturn the results of that process only where a clear and substantial basis for doing so is demonstrated. So now we're going to, in reviewing the full record, and it says the appellants renewed some of the concerns council had heard in the prior appeal, including the practical impact of yet unresolved interoperability issues between GFCI and HVAC equipment. Additionally, the ballots on TIA 1653 and 54 reflect that co-making panel 2 agreed that emergency nature is met. However, each ballot failed on technical merit by a single vote, one single vote. And then it says the council found that the task group accomplished its charge. Now that right there tells me everything you need to know. The council found that task group did exactly what they were supposed to do and show the technical merit that was there. And yet it got voted down. Now that something's not right here, but let's go a little further. It said it accomplished its charge, which was to bring diverse and materially affected interests together to seek resolution of the technical concerns presented in the appeal on a narrow issue within co-making panel 2 scope. In the present case of dueling TIAs and in light of the task group's work, the council found that the task group's TIAs to reflect the closest point of agreement to address this controversial matter. Wow. I mean, wow.
Yeah, and I kind of see where David Engelhart, and I agree with you, sir. I kind of see where David Englehart's going with this one. He's basically saying that we need to run a grounded conductor to these units to address the leakage current, and that's probably a good solution. But at the same time, they're justifying this whole code change based on the fact of that they're calling. Me and James we've talked about this a lot. They're saying, okay, well, this AC condenser connects to an outlet. And we're like, okay, where is it? And they're like, well, no, it is the outlet. And then we're like, okay, well, is that rated for a wet location? And they kind of go back and forth on this. But to David's point, they're saying that the GFCIs are tripping based on this leakage current. And this child's tragic death in 2007, rest in peace, Montreal Pergo, that it was a tragic death. And, this is Southside Chicago, kids jumping a fence, lands on an AC unit, crushes the seal tight, doesn't have an equipment ground, kills the kid. That's horrible. But to justify all of this stuff and then to basically just underhandedly try to make it just keep applying to what you wanted it to apply to, I think is irresponsible from co-making panel 2, in my opinion.
Well, certain members. Now, I will take this a little further. Now, watch this. It says, appellants raised concern that as of the date of the hearing, there was no HVAC HVAC industry representation on co-making panel 2, but simultaneously acknowledge the difficulty to find interested parties to participate given the broad scope of co-making panel 2. That said, the council recognized that by expanding GFCI protection requirements, Article 210 now impacts parties such as the HVAC industry in many ways. Then it said, the council agreed with the appellant that it is therefore important to expand co-making panel 2 membership to add additional parties who may now be directly impacted by Article 210. Well, now what that's telling me is there's going to be an HVAC guy on there, probably electrical vehicle service equipment. I mean, this is about to change. And it says,
Right.
council encourages the participants and other members of the HVAC industry to apply for membership on co-making panel 2. Also, the council directs NFPA staff to call for additional members to co-making panel 2 and other interest classification as well. So there, you can get a lot of other different members on there just for appliances. I mean,
Right.
this committee is about to change, is what's about to happen. Then it says, the council has reviewed the entire record concerning this matter and has considered all the arguments put forth in this appeal. In the view of the council, this appeal does not present a clear and substantial basis upon which to overturn the results yielded by the NFPA standards development process. Accordingly, the council has voted to uphold the appeal. The effect of this action is that NFPA 70, the National Electrical Code, the 2020 and 23 editions will now include the text from TIA numbers 1653 and 1654 rather than the text of TIA 1656 and 57, which was submitted by who? The certain co-making panel 2 members.
Wow. Wow. That's like big stop sign right on your face. Stop sign right on your face.
I tell you, when I saw this come up, I was like, okay, there's about to be some changes that are about to take place to co-making panel 2. And basically, I've been in this long time, when they come in and they start adding new members to your co-making panel, that tells you you're doing something wrong.
Well, yeah, and to me, it's frustrating when you sit there and see that they're like, oh, you connect EBSE hardwired, and the manufacturer says you don't need GFCI protection, and here you have co-making panel 2 say we mandate it to, and that's an outlet, and they're saying that the definition applies and all this stuff applies and all. It's like, dude, that's under the purview of co-making panel 12, not co-making panel 2. So to me, I just think they're getting too big for their britches when it comes to taking stuff away from co-making panel 17 and co-making panel 12, co-making panel 7. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. And right here, this is a good one. And they're telling you that this exception shall expire September 1st, 2026. Well, I got news for you. January 1st, 2024 is when the new HVA UL standard comes out, and it's still not compatible. And if you think that standard is going to be completely changed by then, it ain't going to happen. And there's going to have to be some clarification that's going to have to take place, especially for outdoor outlets, and getting full explanation on this, because there's if you go to other articles in the code, they're specific about receptacle outlets and hardwired. And, it's like Dimitrovitz, he said on he's on his podcast, he said, well, that's separate from 210.8F. They handle their own requirements over there. Well, since when did one certain piece of equipment cover their own requirements and another piece of equipment didn't? Right. I don't agree with that statement. Not one bit.
Well, yeah, it's picking and choosing, just like you said.
That's right. And this just sort of finished it off. And this shows you here for 2020 and 23. And you're seeing that same exception has been applied now to each one of those as a revision.
Right.
So now you don't have to take my word for it or my opinion. This is final. This is what they're telling you. And I'm telling you, there's going to be more that's going to take place when 2026 comes around. There's going to be a lot of clarification that's going to start to take place because of some of the things certain members of co-making panel 2 have said. And
one of the things that's interesting about this is that they say certain listed equipment, and to me, that's gonna make just hell on earth for inspectors.
it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole reason it's getting deleted. And my argument, and this has always been my argument, when this first came out, there were certain code people that were like, yeah, the disconnects and outdoor outlet needs GFCI protection. I was like, all right, cool. Sounds good. Then the same code people come back and say, oh, but a disconnect's not an outlet. It's just a point on the wiring system where it's connected to the premises wiring, all this. And so I'm like, okay, well, you would have been better off just saying it was the disconnect. It's the load side terminal is the disconnect, and end of story. I'm not arguing it. And then next thing you know, it moves over to here. Then it moves over. Like, we probably have them on 5 different places now. We have code people out there with the illustration with it hovering, with not even pointing to anything.
Mm-hmm.
Then they're sitting there. Oh wow, I'm glad that guy's making it more accurate. How can you go in a classroom and point to something, or you can't even point to something? You're just like, yeah, this thing needs this, but we can't show you where it is. It just needs it. That's it's just asinine.
Just like that illustration I did, it's a magic outlet. It just magically exists. You can't illustrate it.
Dude, we started out with 6, and then we're told we were stupid and we needed 7. And so then we got a 7th. We made an illustration added the 7th in there, the magic one,
Well, if you remember when the debate started and they told me it was a disconnect, I said, no, it isn't. I said a disconnect is a device or group of devices. And then I gave them the definition of device. And I said, hell, if you're saying that, it can be at the circuit breaker. And they're, oh, you're stupid. And I said, all you got to do is read the definition. And then they come back, said it was at the condenser. And I said, well, is that a wet location? They were like, what does that got to do with it? I said, well, the wiring method, everything has to be rated for a wet location. And I'm sure that area inside that AC unit's not ready for a wet location. And they got all bent out of shape with me on that. So I was like, okay, well, whatever.
Yeah, and I do agree with that, David. David says that the 210.8F argument kind of stems from some arguments we had with 404 where they had some switch devices that were had leakage current. They actually were using the equipment ground as a neutral if you didn't have a neutral at that switch location. And that was kind of a problematic thing. And I think those switches have been actually outlawed, but because they do have that leakage current. Leakage current's a bad thing. The problem that me and James have is that this leakage current thing came out way after this was passed. So what our problem is that they went and they passed 210.8F. Then they said it applies to all this. To me, that's kind of sneaky. It's kind of shady. It's kind of underhanded. I don't see why you can't just be transparent about that whole thing.
Let me answer that for David's question right there.
Okay.
Let me put it back up. Okay. I want to address this. All right. Oh, I'll put it back up. There we go. All right. Now, that I do not disagree with. What the problem with this is, David, is if you look at a switch there, where that switch goes, there's an outlet there, which is the box. Okay. So that is 2 different issues. What the issue is here with 210.8F is them calling the AC unit, in my opinion, an outdoor outlet. I do not agree with that. I agree with the sentiment about the grounded neutral conductor, but if that's what they're worrying about, I feel, this is my opinion once again, I feel if you want GFCI protection for that AC unit, it should be in 210.8D for specific appliances like they do everything else. They shouldn't be calling this an outlet. And I've heard this argument before where somebody said, well, this had to deal same thing like they did with switches. I said, yeah, but there's an outlet there because that's the box. That's your outlet.
Right.
If you go look at Article 316, the first word in that article title is outlets. And that's why I disagree with the GFCI protection in 210.8F as far as it concerns it being called an outlet. I do not disagree about providing GFCI protection. But if you're going to provide GFCI protection and require it, then you should put it in 210.8D. That's just my opinion on it.
And I actually agree with that, just because the fact that there's no confusion about hardwired, vintage, cord and plug connected, all that stuff. I mean, and that's, I think, where the confusion comes in with a lot of people is like, it says, but right in the substantiation is that where an AC condenser connects to an outlet. Mm-hmm. And that could be like in some of those mini split systems, it could connect to an outlet, and there could be multiple things that require GFCI protection. You could have two sides of that split system that requires GFCI protection, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, that's really confusing, and I will read and argue with an inspector and say, show me the outlet, and I'll put it on GFCI.
Correct. But that's the only reason I wanted to clarify that a little bit. I knew about that argument, what David was talking about, but my whole debate on it as far as an outlet, it's not so much the GFCI protection, even though it's not compatible yet, but if you really want it, it should be in 210.8D. All right.
Oh, now, wow. Did we get a change for 2023 on this one?
Yeah. And I wanted to address this. Now,
wow, that's really crazy.
They got rid of a little bit of text and rewrote this. And what it says is the size of the grounding this is for 250/66 as far as including it with the sizing for table 250/66. And what it says, the size of the grounding electrode conductor and bonding jumper are jumpers for connection of grounding electrodes shall not be smaller than given in table 250/66. So if I'm sizing for my bonding jumpers or my grounding electrode conductors, it tells you to use the table. And then it says, once again, except as permitted in 250.66A through C. And, we've had this argument before, and I think there's going to have to be a little more change on this, because if you go back and you look at 1978, 81, 84, in those areas there, when they first started taking and developing, which at that time was table 250-94, the code making panel made it very clear. If I was going to a ground or to a concrete encased electrode, they said that even, somebody had made a proposal and said they thought it was an oversight because before they started making changes to that table, you could actually use the table and go something smaller than a number 4. Okay. And he made that statement because that's when they were calling certain things made electrodes and all of this. And the code,
and they actually removed that. They removed that term made electrode. But David makes a good point here about the 404 issue, and yeah, that was true, David. I did install some of those switches, and I did see that little jumper they had in there that was leakage current, pretty big problem.
Now, when you looked at the code making panel substantiation on this, and you were going to a concrete encased electrode, they even stated, and this wasn't passed by a narrow margin, this was a unanimous vote by the code making panel, that they even considered a number 6 grounding electrode conductor to be too small to connect to that concrete encased electrode. Okay. Now, the way it's the A through C reads, basically when they put that in, the opinion of the committee was that you never needed to go larger number 4. And Dad did a great explanation on this because he was there when this took place. And he said the reason they didn't want anything larger than number 4 because it created air gaps in there. And if you got a good sized surge in there, that it would pop loose. And
Right.
he said that's why they did that. That was based on testing and everything. So I think there's going to have to be something that's put in the next based on the substantiation during that code cycle of the testing that was done, that you just connect a number 4 to it and be done with it. And I'm gonna
I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm just saying, I think that the way it was kind of misinterpreted because some of the testing was done just for the electrode, and then some of the testing was done with the grounding electrode conductor and the electrode. So I think that kind of got split up, and then some people thought, oh, the testing was only done for the electrode, but how did they do the testing if they didn't test it with that size electrode?
Sure, they did. And the people
and
that
if you
were
run it like a
go
number
back
8, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. If you run like a number 8 or something, you're creating a choke, in my opinion.
That's right.
I could be
That's
wrong.
exactly what Dad said. He said you'd choke it. He said the testing proved that. And there's a lot of them that just want to argue over this, but you know, like I've stated on this, I'm not giving my opinion. I'm showing you what the code making panel stated at that time. And unless the grounding has changed somehow, I don't think our ground has changed any. So
Right.
how's the testing going to change? So
yeah, and you had a really good point on that with this whole outlet thing, because you know, how many EVSE chargers did they have in 1940s? You know, when the definition of a outlet was you know, in code making panel 1, and then you know, when you come into that, when you use that, it's like this is 44 years. Nothing's changed in 44 years on this.
Oh yeah, you know what was interesting is they made the comment to me about or about this and for the grounding electrode conductor to a concrete encased electrode, and they said, well, that happened back in the late 70s, early 80s, and you're trying to take a substantiation back in. I said, but yet, I said, you want to take a definition that I know hasn't changed since 1947 for an outlet. And I said, I doubt when they wrote the definition for an outlet that they wasn't considering AC units and electrical vehicle service equipment, etc. And guess what? It got quiet at that point.
I bet I bet you in 1947 they didn't think that every piece of equipment installed outdoors had to have GCI protection.
Oh yeah, but that's where we're at on that, and that's why I argued with them on that. Now, what they did here, this is a revision they did to help provide clarity here for all the equipment grounding conductors that are in a box, that they are required to be what? Connected to each other. Okay.
Right.
And the reason they do this is to ensure that the equipment grounding conductor, where you have any type of faulted circuit, is routed with what? The ungrounded conductors of the faulted circuit. And then they tell you, they also added language here, and where you have metal boxes, and they tell you when you're sizing that equipment bonding jumper or equipment grounding conductor, what table do you do it? Table 25122, based on what?
Yeah.
The overcurrent protection devices, or should I say the largest overcurrent protection device.
The largest ungrounded conductor usually.
So you look at that, that's, to me, there was some confusion in this before by some people, and I think them doing this continuity of the equipment grounding conductor and attachment and boxes here, this shouldn't be confusing anymore. Okay. Right. And I've heard people, you know, make statements on, I'm like, no, you got to tie all them equipment grounds together. Now, the other one I thought was interesting, and
this one's submitted by Mike Holt, man. This is so funny.
This is the length of free conductors at outlets, junction, and switch points. And what they did here, they just added a new sentence here, and all this was to help to do is clarify that the free conductor that you have there is permitted to be what? Spliced. Okay. There
Yeah.
was some that said you couldn't splice. I was like, that's crazy. That's why you got the free conductor in there to splice it or not splice it. And
No, this was a
so
failed public input by Mike Holt in 2011, and I picked it up and I actually ran it as one of my myth of the weeks. I didn't run it as a myth of the week, but I did it as a post for my Nat King code, and I basically put it in there. And I basically ran this whole entire language, but I put unspliced in there as if Mike's proposal passed in 2011. And I got a lot of people to be like, that's true. And then, and it was funny because a lot of inspectors do try to enforce that, to say that you don't have enough unspliced conductor in the box. And then come to find out, it can be unspliced or spliced in the box. It was really funny. That was I busted a myth on that one, because that one, there was people getting failed on inspections for that one.
And I knew this was one of them that was confusing before. That's why I put it in here. This is one that's clarified now. There shouldn't be any more confusion here. All right.
Right.
And then the other one, which you remember me talking about this is where you had your boxes, conduits, and fittings. And this is where they come in and made a clarification that where you have a box or conduit body, that it's required here that they shall be installed at each outlet point, switch point, conductor splice point, conductor junction point, conductor termination point, wiring method transition point. That's a good one. Or conductor pull point, unless otherwise permitted for wiring methods with interior access equipment protection. That right there, the main one in all of that, in my opinion, is the wiring method transition point.
Right.
That right there is telling you that where you're looking at these wiring methods and you're looking at where you need to take and install a box or conduit body, this is where you're going to do them at all these locations right here.
We might have to do another one, a rerun of my myth of the week. Remember that one I had where the MC cables just go right down the pipes?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Matter of fact, I had a good one on that, a picture of that one. I remember that. Yeah, you're like, I've never seen that one before. That's funny. All right. Now, another one that they did here in 312.10 was screw or other fasteners. And all they did, they added a whole new section here. And this is to help clarify the hazards that are involved when you have insertion, blind, or otherwise screws into enclosures within the scope of Article 312. And they tell you here, any screw that is sanctioned by the equipment manufacturer is automatically what? Accepted. It's acceptable. No other way. There's no other thing you have to think about. But it says other screws, such as those to attach identifying medallions, must have machine threads and have what type of ends? Blunt ends. So what this does, this eliminates any sharp points or coarse threads. Okay. I think this is important here. This goes in and tells you exactly the type of screws or other fasteners you can use when you're taking and using these for insertion into these different type of enclosures. This takes care of it. So there shouldn't be any confusion. I know before there were confusion on certain types of screws you could use. This here takes care of it. Okay.
Right.
And that gets me to the topic of the week.
You know what I think is freaking funny about that one is we go through, I used to be an inspector for certain jurisdictions, and I used to do a lot of different stuff. And a lot of times when you see some of these code changes, you see how they make sense based on the failure of what failed. And when you look at it and you're like, dude, that guy, he just put like all thread right through the middle of the box and then stuffed the wire in there and it blew up. Well, yeah, you know what I mean? But, you know, you have to be pretty far south to do something where it's gonna, you know, blow up like that. Like, I mean, it's kind of common sense, but at the same time, it's really awesome when you're like in an inspector position and you can say, 110.12 not installed in a neat and skillful manner or whatever, neat and professional, skillful manner. You can say, I always would put that in there, but then always justify it with a bunch of other code violations, like that, like a violation of 315B, a violation of this, a violation of that, violation of this, and the reason a lot of times I'll do the violations, like as an inspector, is I wanted to teach whoever messed it up. I wanted to teach them like, hey, you didn't violate one code, you violated 12 codes. You know what I mean? Like, and this is all of them. And you know what? Some overlap. And I guess that's a lot of my problem with 210.8F. Because to me, I feel like this next cycle, it's going to be like a boat anchor. I feel like it's code making panel 2 claims there's going to be a lot of equipment that's going to be left unprotected if you put it in 210.8D. I disagree. I feel like all the vital protection that's required in outdoor equipment has already been covered. You have HVAC equipment. 0 deaths has occurred from code compliant installed HVAC equipment outdoors, whether end of life, qualified person, unqualified person, all this stuff, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0.
Right.
There's not a body count. They claim a body count. There's not a body count. It is sad that Montrell Pergo lost his life on August 3rd, 2007. That's bad. That sucks. But it was an unlicensed company that they got him a new AC unit and they temped it in temporarily, and it just so happened with a 20-foot length of seal tight, they used the seal tie as the equipment ground. That once that equipment ground got lost of that piece of equipment, then it went straight to Montrell Pergo's body, and he lost his life. So it was tragic and everything, but at the same time, that's still no justification for basically saying all outdoor outlets are now AC units, EVSE, well pumps, gate controllers, solar, like whatever you want it to be is what it is. And to me, that needs to, we need to figure that out. That's my opinion.
Well, it's like I said, if code making panel 2 sort of feels that the listing and labeling isn't good enough, won't you design the equipment? UL hadn't seen a problem with it. If there was an emergency nature, trust me, UL would address that in the new standard, period.
Right.
End of discussion. There's no problem there. There's 0 deaths. And, there was one unfortunate, but that wasn't due to the AC equipment. That was done to improper wiring, period. That's end of it.
Well, and then my other frustration goes into the fact that, okay, so this happened in 2007. So why wasn't a proposal made in 2008, like right away, to try to address it? Okay, well, that's fine. You could go to the next code cycle. Okay, so why wasn't it done in 2011? Okay, they might have missed it, 2011. Okay, we go to 2014. Still nothing. And then you go to 2017. Still nothing. Now all of a sudden here you're in 2020 and it's a emergency change. To me, that's where I kind of raise some red flags on that kind of stuff. And, people are like, oh, you said something about backdoor deals. It's like, well, I don't know. I mean, that could be a Denny's 2-for-1 coupon. I don't know. I'm not trying to say anybody did anything wrong, but it's weird when you have 4 TIAs and we only needed 1 or 2 whatever.
What's weird is they had a task group, and then you had another certain members of code making panel 2 felt the need to write their own TIA against that. What they put the task group together for with technical substantiation. And the way I read that is the Standards Council said, actually, the task group provided substantiation. The other TIAs didn't provide it. That tells you what you need to know right there. So when we make a statement, something fishy going on co-making panel 2, that right there is enough to tell you something fishy's wrong here. Something's not right. And I don't care if
So
they like it or not. I'm
so
telling the truth.
is there any more votes on that, or is that the final decision for
That's
2023?
it. That's the
Okay.
final decision, period. And
Okay.
2026 is coming. And what's going to happen is those votes that were passing by one all of a sudden ain't going to happen because there's going to be new members on there. And I've already talked to 2 members on co-making 2 that don't agree with what's in place. They don't believe there's an outlet also. They believe it's utilization equipment. There's no outlet, and they agree with me. If you want GFCI protection, it should be in 210.8D.
Well, and you
And I will
like
say
I
this:
pointed.
I've actually talked to people at NFPA. I'm not going to give any names. They agree with what I said too. So,
Well,
for these other
um,
guys that are out there saying we don't know what we're talking about, nobody agrees with us, I got news for them. There's a lot of people. There's thousands and thousands and thousands that agree with this interpretation. And come this next cycle, it's going to be interesting.
the one thing that I thought was interesting when we did our EBSE episode, I looked into the code on 625 and it says must be supplied by individual branch circuit. If you look up the definition of individual branch circuit, it doesn't say it has to be connected to an outlet. It says
Utilization equipment.
where the branch circuit terminates to utilization equipment right there.
That's
And
right.
so that's fine if you want to say it has an outlet, that's fine. But the code language isn't required to cover that and make your argument true.
That's right. Their argument's false. I don't care. I'll tell them.
I agree.
Y'all are putting words in, and when you say it connects at an infinite point, that point can be anywhere. I mean, it just magically exists. That's the first time in all my years of doing the code I've ever heard of such a stupid, and I'll say it, that's a stupid interpretation that no location, it just magically exists. Uh, I'll tell you what, that's just unbelievable. I still can't believe people say that.
Yeah. All
But
right. So we got 5 changes, right?
yep. Let me cue it up. All right. Now I think in this one I've done a bunch of these in advance, but I think we actually get into Article 500 or Chapter 5 this time. Now,
Nice.
what they did here is they made a change in Table 453A, and I didn't put the tables in because I don't have them all drawn yet and updating them. But basically, there will no longer be notes in there. Uh, there's going to be a reference. It's not going to be notes anymore. So when you look at tables 450.3A and B, you won't see the notes underneath the percentages anymore like you used to see. There's just going to be like 1, 2, 3, I think is what it is, that you'll refer down below that it'll no longer say notes in them. Okay, so a lot of people that are used to referencing notes, get ready. You're not going to be doing that anymore.
Well, question for you. So, like 450.3 reference got removed, right?
Well, no, you still have 450.3 in the code. It's just the table itself doesn't reference the notes
So,
anymore.
like
Look at the
440.3 got
table and you
removed,
got
right?
your percentages, and it'll say, see, like 1, 2, 3.
So, like
Which section?
440.3 got removed. So 440.3 got removed, right? I thought all the dot threes got removed. And for
Oh yeah,
2023.
well that you're talking about HVAC equipment. You're talking about AC and
Okay.
refrigeration equipment. That's not in
So
450.
it's still in there for transformers.
Well, it's still there, but it's mainly referring to the tables and stuff for your percentages for sizing now. Okay,
Okay, gotcha.
that's what it
Right
is.
on.
It,
Cool.
it
Sorry, I
the
didn't mean to.
440.
I gotta get into
No,
my 2023 a little better.
well, 440.3 that you're talking about, that there's no sizing percentages or anything there. You got to go to 440.22A to get those sizings for the AC and refrigeration equipment. Here in transformers, 450.3 is going to deal with the percentage using the tables to get your percentages for sizing the transformers.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
All right, sweet.
And then they also took in 450.43C, they made a revision to the title to make sure you understand this deals with accessibility. And this helps clarify that the section is addressing more than just locks. Okay. And they also revised the wording where that talks about the personnel doors. And this is to ensure that those vault doorways open wide enough to provide proper access and egress, which of course helps provide safety. And they have to be capable of being opening of not less than 90 degrees in the direction of egress. Okay. And of
Yeah,
course,
I agree with that.
they kept it in there. Of course, it still has to be equipped with listed fire exit hardware. Okay.
Yep. Panic.
And then 460.24 is where they got into the switching for your load current, and they made a revision here about the group operated switches. And these are to be evaluated now for switching a capacitive load. And the reason they do that is because you can have switching of capacitor banks, and that can generate recovery voltages of roughly about 2 to 3 times the rated system voltage. And of course, if that happens, that can lead to what? Restrikes and continued flow. And if that's the case, that can cause the capacitors to do what? They can rupture. Okay. You can also have external equipment flashovers. You could have failure of the over voltage device, and you could also damage the switching device contacts. Okay.
Right.
So, based on that switching of the capacitor banks, basically, what does that result in? It can have very large what? Inrush currents. Okay. And that's
Yeah,
what they're telling you about these group rated switches.
and it seems like that would mean that you have more control over what loads you're introducing on the system, and so that's probably a good change.
Yeah, and they made it very clear that that capacitor switch operation, it's going to open all your ungrounded conductors and the switch, and then it tells you what it's capable of for the following. And basically, that's what it's all about is evaluating the switch due to capacitive load and the rupturing and everything else that can happen or possibly could happen.
Wow.
Okay,
Okay, cool. That's
so
probably all right change.
yeah, that's a great change. And then we get into chapter 5, and there wasn't a ton here that changed, but you have to be aware of what they did. Okay, so what
Okay.
they did in 500.1A, okay, this is going to deal. You'll have A1 and A2. Okay, that'll be the next one, and they made a revision at the scope of this article to clarify what is covered. So they're telling you here that this article is going to cover which type of areas. It's going to cover a class 1 div 1 and 2, class 2 div 1 and 2, and class 3 div 1 and 2. That's what's covered by Article 500. So they wanted to clarify this. And the reason they had to clarify this was because there was some that was going and looking at this article and wanting to apply zone locations. And you don't apply zone locations. You got to go to Article 505 and 506 to do that. So when you pick up 500.1B, it tells you what's not covered, and look what's there. Zone location.
Right. Do
Okay?
you know what else is not covered?
Well, yeah, it tells you right here. You got
Uh,
where you have.
unclassified areas.
Oh yeah.
No,
Well,
I'm
they
just kidding. I mess with the inspectors on that one because they try to enforce some of this, and you're like, hey, this is an unclassified area. Why are you trying to enforce a classified, requirement on an unclassified area? So I
well
just think
sure.
it's funny every time.
Well, like they show here, they show the zone 0, 1, and 2 and zone 0, 20, 21, 22. Then they also tell you where you have unique risks and explosion hazards, such as what? Explosive, pyrotechnics, and blasting agencies. Okay.
Right.
And they go through and talk about all these other different ones it doesn't apply to. Okay. So they
Dude, do you want to know something that was really messed up for me?
what's that?
I had to sign a safety thing saying that we do not do any blasting operations. Like, dude, wouldn't that bum you out though? It's like you at least want to have that. Like, hey, maybe there's a chance that we could do blasting operations in the future or something. But I was like, what? I was like, I had to actually sign a waiver that I would not conduct any blasting operations at my job site. And I was like, I guess. I was like, I'll sign
Did
this, but I'm not agreeing with it. I was mad.
you should have
I
told him?
want
You
to
should
have
have said,
blasting
"Don't you
operations.
know that my?" You should have told him, "Don't you know my family used to have fireworks stores and stuff? I know all about
True.
blasting."
Yeah, true. Yeah, everyone knows. Everyone knows.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
funny.
you got me. You pinned me on that one.
That's right.
Got
You
me.
tell him I've been practicing blasting for years. I've been doing it
My
since I was a
my
little kid. I have a lot of experience.
my grandpa was one of the only people in the state of Colorado that was direct importer from China for all fireworks, like when I was growing up.
Mhm.
And so I was around a lot of fireworks growing up, but I was mostly carrying the mortars. Like that's all they had us for, like carrying the stuff around. They're like, yeah, get that mortar over there. Like we got 300, got a load in that trailer. I'm like, dang it. So that was
That's
awesome.
funny. All
Yeah.
right, you
So
ready for your
going
tool
tool
of
of
the
the
week,
week.
brother? Yeah, yeah. Let's go
Yep.
ahead and sum it
Awesome.
up. All right.
It's time for Tool Review of the Week. Sponsored by Electricians Only Tool Review and Nipex Tradesman.
All right, this is so awesome. I saw this on the job site the other day. One of the guys was using it, and I was like, "Yeah, how you like it?" And he was like, "Oh man, it's perfect. It could do everything we need it to do." And he actually said some pretty positive things that I wouldn't see out of like other tripods. Most tripods are pretty pricey, and they're kind of wobbly and whatever, but this was pretty sturdy. I did put a piece of strut on there and kind of wrench on it a little bit, and it seemed to hold up really good. Seemed to withstand the force pretty good. And like I say, it was about $500, which that's about in the ballpark for a standard tripod. It looked like it did have some improvements that I noticed. Kind of some of the different things that I noticed when you come into, you have different pipe sizes you could put in there, different things you could do. It looked like pretty much everything I would use in a standard tripod it had, plus a couple of extra things. So I rated it very high. I really like the Milwaukee stuff for industrial. All the Milwaukee tools seem to really like they look into what you're doing out there in industrial, and they just make sure that's pretty stable. A lot of times, what we do is we run like a power pony on these things, and you could tell on that back leg that's pretty stable. Has that nice brace. It has a long stance, and the braces with come out with the other two legs. I really like that about it, and it seemed really stable. And yeah, I'd recommend this. And like I say, it might be a little pricey. every time I do a Milwaukee stuff, I think pretty much you're paying for the Milwaukee name and not necessarily the quality. But it looked like they did, to me, it looked like they did a lot of research on what we want out there in the industrial site and how we want our tripods to stand up. And I really like this, and I would recommend it to a friend. And like I say, cost was a little high, a little pricey. Did everything. I think it could do up to a 6-inch pipe. You could tell the chain's pretty long there. You could do pretty big pipe on that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was definitely a good tool, and I give it a high rank. There was very little negatives that I could say about it.
Oh, awesome. I apologize, everybody. Yep. The internet's running a little slow, but it's 12 degrees here. I think the grid and everything's freaking out.
12 degrees? Dude, it was negative 13 when I got to work today.
It's a different type of code there. Dude, it's cold here, brother.
Like, it was negative 50 with wind chill factor. We're almost in Wyoming where I'm working.
God, there was a guy that posted on the Orange Blood site, and he was in Amarillo. He said, well, guys, he said, I woke up this morning. He said it was like 20 something below. I was like, screw that crap. I was like, man. But yeah, it's cold.
It was pretty spooky. We broke a record today at 7 below for our high.
Oh. Well,
that was our high temperature.
It's all going to warm up. I mean, we are, after all, under warmer global warming, aren't we?
you gotta keep the dream alive, man. Just do it for Al Gore, man. Come on. You gotta believe me. I'm cereal. Come on, you guys.
I'm not believing him right at this moment. Let me tell you, it's cold here, boy.
Yeah, I thought about that today. Dude, that was so cold. It was like melting your skin. And like there's people, like I work in a hospital, and there's people that are like, that'll kill you fast. It will, that cold. Killed my freaking dang windshield, I'll tell you that much.
I have something, I don't know what it is, but they found this out later. I'm actually allergic to the cold. It gets too cold, I start swelling up. I get too cold, and I try to stay out.
Oh, you must be a freaking inspector. You must be an inspector type.
I am. I'm an indoor type. It's like it can be 100 degrees outside. Doesn't bother me one bit. You get it down below 20 below, I'm not happy. I don't like it.
Yeah,
I can just feel my whole body.
I can honestly say it doesn't bother me too much, like as long as I'm dressed properly. And everyone out there that's watching this, they'll know. I was working with a few guys. We had to go work in like an industrial freezer, and it was like 11 below, and it was in the middle of June.
Oh.
And we could work in there longer than the lift would last. Like wow. We had a timer on the lift for the hydraulics freezing. If we didn't come down and get out of that freezer, that lift would freeze. And I mean, we would push it as hard as we could to be in there as long as we could. And it would just barely get out of there because the oil was so cold and everything. It would just barely get out of that freezer by the time, like, I think I had it down to like an hour and 20 minutes it could stay in there. Like, we started at an hour, and I was like, we were going out a little too fast. I'm like, oh, man, I think I could push it a little longer. But it was funny because we were doing a whole bunch of new lighting in there, and they had, like, a motion sensor and everything. So when we were hooking them all up, we'd be up there working, and we'd be putting in the new light, and we'd have it isolated so the power is shut off from the one side. Well, then the motion sensor was shut off the lights that we already installed, and we didn't have no light in there. We're basically dead in the water because we only had the power installed to those lights that we already did. And so it was pretty spooky when you're up on a lift in a 11 below and you got X amount of time to get that lift out of there. And then all the lights shut off, and we were throwing screwdrivers. We're trying to get the motion to trigger whatever, but it wouldn't trigger it, and it was a big freezer. We're up there like probably 20 foot in the air, like working on these things. And, so we'd get the next light in and we'd have to like basically do it in the dark. I mean, we'd have flashlights and everything like that, but it was just one of those things where, my apprentice is like, hopefully because what you'd do is you'd have to kind of like take the lift and go over top of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then you'd have to like back up and hope that when you're coming down, you're not clipping it. You know what I mean? Because you can't see. And it was interesting. I mean, my apprentice is sitting there having like flashlight over the edge of the lift and we're going down. But it's some of these adventures that we do in the electrical trade and the electrical industry kind of make us better. And that's what we're about. That's what we're trying to do this podcast for, just reach out to people like David Englehart, very brilliant individual, really awesome to have him in the chat. And, everyone for joining us. We really appreciate you coming and joining us every week and just, trying to make this like an awesome experience and learning. And, we're not trying to bash anybody or say anybody screwed up or anything, but it's the whole thing that we've been called like a lot of names over, what our beliefs are. And we've always said it's our opinion and you don't have to believe our opinion. We're just telling you what the code says. And, that's all it's all about,
Looks like we got proved right on some of it so far. So, but we're, for those that are wondering, we're not going to be doing next week. It's through the whole holiday weekend through Christmas, the first of the year. I got a lot of stuff going on, partying.
We might do a pre-recorded.
Yeah, I'll send one out on the pre-recorded. Yeah. Something we've already done. Heck,
I might. Yeah, we could do that too.
I mean, we got some good stuff, but
dude, that one with Crystal Hunter, that was a good one, man. That was one of my favorites. We can
pull that out of there too. I mean, we can do anything we want. So
yeah, I agree. That'd be cool.
Anyway, let's wrap this booger up, man. I'm hungry.
Hey, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. Really awesome to have y'all hanging out with us and joining us every week. And it's really awesome. I hope all your holidays are awesome and warm. And
at least not.
Always remember, make every day an easy day.
That's right.
My apprentice tells me that all the time. He's like, easy day Wednesday. Like, yep. Yes, sir. That's what I like. Easy day.
Well, with that said, everybody have Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We'll see y'all after first of the year. We'll do next one. We'll do another topic, the part 4 of confusion changes that took place. And then the next week after that, we'll have Dad on doing the PPE for 70E. And then the next week after that, we'll have Mark Barr on. He'll be doing the PPE for the utility side.
Nice.
So can't
wait.
3 already set up for start of the year, and then we'll be having some new guests on and stuff. And it's been a great year so far. Appreciate everybody. I mean, this podcast just keeps building up, and we appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely. Awesome. Thanks for joining all NEC for Dummies.
Yes, sir. Everybody, see y'all next year. Y'all stay safe out there during the holidays, and Merry Christmas once again. Happy New Year. See y'all next week.
Thanks for joining tonight, David Englehart. Join our Facebook group. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Volt Online Academy. Join me. Ultimate Electrical Education, Volt Online Academy. Thanks for joining me. Check out Facebook, out now. Thanks for joining us, great boy. Thanks for joining us, Steven. Thanks for joining us, 2023. Let's go crazy. Check out the Step Back.